So the pesto recipe, which we'll talk about in detail, don't worry, is in this book, but it's also in this book. Now that's the only duplicate in these two books is the parsley pesto. Why? Well, I first introduced it here and I needed it in my pesto primavera pasta salad recipe here. And I didn't want to assume that people just had this book, right? So I had to duplicate it, but that's the only duplicate between the two. If you have these two books, man, you are just so many recipes at your fingertips. It's going to be awesome. So pesto normally made with basil, right? We get that. But years ago, I just had a problem with that. Like I made fresh pesto with a whole bunch of basil I got from my sister. And I loved the process. I thought this is cool that we can make pesto. I love that. But unless you have a garden that is currently has a bounty of basil, or you're a millionaire and you can afford to buy the fresh basil at the store because you need a ton of it to make any sort of substantial amount of pesto, right? Unless you have one of those two scenarios going on, guess what? You're not making pesto and you're going to buy it in a jar. So what I wanted to do was write a pesto recipe. And I wrote this one years ago that used an herb that was available all the time and was cheap. And so I went with parsley, right? I mean, at $1.29 a bunch, sometimes you get it for $1 a bunch, sometimes $1.49, but still, and it's available year round. And we, as this family, we love parsley pesto better than any basil pesto that we've ever tried anywhere. Okay, you will really love this recipe. Now, you have to adjust, and everything in this recipe for parsley pesto is exactly the same as a basil pesto recipe, except for two ingredients. And one is obvious, it's the parsley, right? So I say in there, curly leaf parsley. By the way, this does not work very well with Italian flat leaf parsley. It's a different flavor. I've really tailored this recipe to the curly leaf, and that's why I stayed in there, curly leaf parsley. And sometimes people think, oh, I'm gonna be more gourmet and it's gonna be better because I'm being more gourmet and getting the Italian flat leaf. And it's not, it's a different flavor. But anyway, here's a little glimpse of what happens in my culinary brain when I was writing this recipe. In the herb family, you would honestly say that basil is a sweet herb. Yes? Everybody agrees with that? Just shake your head. Yes? Okay. So you would also agree in the nut family. So what's the traditional nut that is in basil pesto? Anybody?
Pine nut.
Thank you. Pine nuts. Yes, you got it. So in the nut family, you could honestly say that pine nuts are bitter, right? They are. If you ever tasted a pine nut on their own, there's bitter. It's actually not a very enjoyable nut on their own to eat. So here we have a basil pesto recipe. I'm taking out the sweet herb and I'm putting in instead, really, if you look at the herb family, parsley is kind of bitter, right? In comparison to basil. Taking out the sweet herb, putting in a bitter herb. So we can't have that bitter pine nut in there. So I took out the bitter pine nuts, and to substitute the sweet basil that's no longer there, I put in a sweet nut, the cashew. Take out the sweet herb, put in a bitter herb, take out the bitter nut, put in a sweet nut. And then it balances it out and everything works. Everything else is exactly the same. The olive oil, the Parmesan cheese, the pepper, the garlic, the lemon juice, everything the same. So if you ever want to do this recipe and you happen to have basil, switch out those two, go pine nuts instead of cashews and do basil instead of parsley. I don't know how much basil it'll be because we're just doing one bunch of curly leaf. Anyway, so we're gonna get started on this parsley pesto recipe. Everybody break out their food processor. Now I gotta ask the question, can I do this in the blender if I haven't got a food processor? It's not gonna work, okay? Because first of all, pesto is thick. You're gonna have to be able to grind the nuts in there, the cashews. You're gonna have to be able to grind up the hearty parsley in there. It's not going to work in a blender. It's just going to be all gummed up at the bottom. It's not going to circulate through properly. You need a food processor. Sometimes people have heard in the old, Italian days, doing by hand with a mortar and pestle, right? And doing that, good luck. It's going to take you a long time, especially with this kind of volume, and especially dealing with that hearty parsley. You're going to run into nothing but problems. So if you want to try, hey, go ahead and do that. So the first step in a food processor, grind the cashews on high speed for approximately 15 seconds. So we're doing 2/3 of a cup of roasted salted cashews. Okay, it's just your regular snacking cashews, right? I don't know if you know this, but raw cashews has a toxin that's a little bit poisonous, and all cashews by law to be sold must be cooked. If you buy the baking ones in the baking aisle in a bag that are not salted, they're just steamed, okay, but they are cooked, even though it says raw cashews. You're not allowed to sell raw cashews. So just your snacking ones, roasted salted cashews, that's what that means. 2/3 of a cup going in your food processor and process it on high for 15 seconds. Let's do that together, shall we? You're just looking for them to become like a course meal, okay? The next ingredient is the olive oil. Now, don't get ahead of me. We're only using half of it. If you look at step number 2, it says continue to process on high speed while slowly adding 1/4 cup of the olive oil. So we're gonna only add half of that half cup, so 1/4 cup to that as it's going. And then we're going to process for another 30 seconds with the oil in there to make it a smooth paste, all right? Take this part off. I'm going to add on high speed 1/4 cup of the olive oil. So that's half of the measured amount, okay? Let's do that together, shall we? And then process for a full 30 seconds. And what that's gonna do is gonna create almost like a nut butter in there, okay? It's gonna make it nice and smooth. You don't wanna have these coarse chunks of nuts in your pesto, okay? Little tiny fine granules is fine, but nothing big chunks of nuts. That's not good. All right. So let's go through a couple of these ingredients. Okay. Turn off the processor and add the cheese. So we're going to add 1/2 cup of grated Parmesan cheese. Now I hand grated this. I just want to take the opportunity to remind you guys, never buy pre-grated cheese of any kind because it has wood pulp in there. They do food grade wood pulp to keep the cheese grating separate. So never buy pre-grated cheese of any kind, mozzarella, cheddar, Parmesan, Asiago, anything. If it's pre-grated, you're eating wood pulp, folks. Don't do it. You're better than that. Buy a block and grate it by hand. It's going to cost you less because you're doing the manual part of it and you're going to look after your health, okay? So we're going to add our 1/2 cup of grated Parmesan. We're also going to add to that our next ingredient, 2 large garlic cloves. And again, we're in a food processor, so that food processor is going to take care of it. Peeled, obviously, right? And just throw those in there. Our next ingredient is juice of a 1/2 lemon. Don't cut your lemon yet. These are the tips that you learn at the Chef Des Zoom classes. So with a lemon, I recently posted a YouTube video on never buy or never use rather bottled lemon juice. Never do it. Because I mean, I have a bottle of lemon juice in the fridge, but I keep it just for acidulating, you know, apple slices, banana slices when I don't want them to go brown. I don't ever use it for flavor because if I want flavor in a recipe, I go for a lemon. That's where lemon juice comes from, not a reconstituted stuff in a bottle. Don't do that, folks. But also by having a fresh lemon, guess what? You can use a zesting tool, whether it's this or a microplane grater, and you can take the zest, the colored part of the skin off, which has these beautiful essential oils. And those essential oils taste more like the fruit than the fruit itself. And normally people put the skins in the garbage, right, without doing anything. And if you ever tried to zest a plastic bottle, it doesn't work. And it's not very good for you. So don't try it. Fresh lemons are the way to go. But every single citrus fruit that comes into your house, lemons, limes, oranges, grapefruits, whatever, I want you to steal the zest from it. And we're going to save the zest tonight and use it as an extra garnish, an extra element of color on top of our salad. It's going to make it pop, look really, really nice. So let's do that. Let's take our zesting tool and let's create some long strands. I like that for garnish. It looks pretty, I think. If you want them finer, you can take out, like I say, a microplane grater and grate the zest off and have little tiny bits. Or chances are, if you're cooking, you have a cutting board and a knife out already, just take your knife and chop it up a little bit if that's what you want to do. It's all good. I like it like this, though. It looks better for my presentation, I think. But regardless, I'm not about to argue with you. So let's grab a little container. Let's set that aside. So now we can cut that lemon. We're going to do juice of a 1/2 lemon in here. And I get it. You know, some lemons are bigger, some are smaller, some are juicier, some are not. Just juice 1/2 of a lemon, whatever lemon you have. And if it needs more lemon juice, just take the other 1/2, do a little squirt at the end after you do a little taste test, okay? If it's a juicy lemon, great. You're gonna have a nice little brightness in there and it's gonna be awesome. Mine is really big and really juicy and I'm using a whole 1/2. Can we say that? Whole 1/2? Sure, why not? So I'm gonna cut it and we always zest first. That's why I didn't want you to cut it. It's very hard to zest a lemon once it's been cut. Cut 1/2 of it. I'm gonna introduce you to a new well, it's not new to us, this gadget, but we've been using it for a while. And I thought I'd share it with you. It's also made by Joseph. See the brand name there? And it's a lemon reamer that has this little basket in there that catches the seeds that lets the juice flow through. So that's what we're going to use tonight to juice our lemon into our food processor. So again, the lid's off. I'm going to take half a lemon, and just squeeze it on there. And it's going to catch the seeds and get all the juice into our beautiful makings of our parsley pesto. Oh, you're going to love this recipe. It's really, really good. It's over the top. All right. Juiced, and look at that. I'll put this over there so you can see. Look at catch the seeds in there. Awesome. Let's go on to our next ingredient, shall we? We need to add our salt. So we're just doing a half teaspoon of salt. Remember, there's a lot of salt in Parmesan. My salt is solidified in there because I prepped it so early. And a half teaspoon of pepper as well. And what we're going to do, I got a whole bunch of parsley here. We're going to dissect this. And I haven't done anything. I haven't washed or anything. So I really want to show you how to do that very efficiently. So let's bring you back over to the sink. And here's what I want you to do with your parsley. I keep that twist tie on there that comes usually with your parsley bunch. And all I need to do is just take off the part that I want. But before we do that, let's give it a rinse, shall we? And I just keep that on there. I'm not worried about any dirt and stuff in there because I'm not using that part. I just want to worry about the part that I'm going to use. By keeping the twist tie on, it's going to keep it all together, letting you really go in there, manipulate, the leaves, and on cold water, cold water, and really get in there and wash away any dirt. You can get right in the base and really spray it in there. It's fantastic. Now look at this. Look how wet this is. You don't want to add all this flavorless, colorless water to your pesto. You're going to blend it right out. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to take where the twist tie is just above with one hand, grab it, and then we're going to rip off the part that we want by twisting it, okay? This part here, after we wash this later, we can put it in our stock bag. And this part here, because parsley is so durable, what I want you to do is literally wring it out like a towel, okay? Squeeze it, it's durable. You're not going to bruise it. It's fine. Squeeze it as hard as you can. Move it around, squeeze it again. And that's fine. That's totally fine, okay? You got all that water out. So what I want you to do now is basically discard all the bigger, woodier stems. You don't have to be meticulous about this, okay? So what I mean by that is, here's a thick stem. So I'm going to break it off here, okay? And leave those ones. I don't want you going like this, okay? Watch. And just the leaves all the way through. These little tiny stems, they're totally fine, but you're going to be there for an hour. Don't do that. All we're looking to do is get rid of the bigger ones. So just go through. Hey, here's a bigger one. Just take the woody part off. There's a bigger one. And leave the smaller ones. It's not going to do any harm. If anything, it's going to add more volume to your pesto by leaving some of the smaller stems on there. You're never going to notice it. So you're just looking for the big woody ones, okay? And just go through and rip them off, all right? And you'll find that just doing that by hand, by squeezing it out, it's still a little bit of water in there, but hey, if you feel bad about that, go and break out your salad spinner, go ahead and spin it. It's all good. You're not going to hurt my feelings. It's just going to take you more time, that you don't really have to do that for this. Salad greens, however, I would never wring them out like a towel. They're too delicate, like fresh spinach and whatever else. I would break out my salad spinner for that. But for parsley, you don't need to. Just use a little bit of elbow grease and then get rid of the woody stems. Great. Just going through and just lay it on your board. Just leave it on your board. We're going to feed it into the processor right now. So our last ingredients for the parsley pesto is this bunch of parsley and our remaining quarter cup of olive oil. So we're going to turn on the food processor again. We're going to take off the top so we can feed in the parsley. Step number 3, we're still on step number 3. We put the garlic and everything in there. We're going to turn on the machine, all right? And we're going to feed all the parsley in as it's running. And I'll stop before I do the oil, okay? Let's meet back there. Take it, put it through, a bit at a time, it's all good. Don't shove the whole thing in there all at once, all right? This way it gets to grind it gradually. Look how thick it's getting. You can see why it's not going to work with a blender, right? All right. all my parsley's in there now, and I'm going to now drizzle that last quarter cup of olive oil in there while it's running, and just let it process, for a good, 30 seconds or something. Okay, so what we want to do now, turn off the food processor and scrape down the sides. And what you're going to want to also do is scrape down by the blade as well. You may see some of the cashews, not whole cashews, obviously, but have just not got mixed together with the parsley very much. So we're just going to give it a good scrape down the sides, scrape down in the inside best we can. Turn the blade around a little bit, and then process it again for another 10 to 15 seconds just to regroup everything in there. And you know what you have now? Parsley pesto. And I want you to taste it. Wow, that's so good. If you feel it needs a little bit more brightness, take your other half a lemon, juice a little bit more, mix it up. But I tell you, this right now is so good. And you can take that, you can put it on pizza, you can serve it with mayonnaise on a sandwich, mix it with sour cream for like a veggie dip. You put this stuff on an old shoe, would taste good. I mean, it's just so tasty. It's so good. Lots of raw garlic in there, okay? So make sure both you and your spouse are eating it at the same time, not just one of you. Otherwise, it's a prophylactic. I'm telling you right now. All right.